Okay, let me open this agenda. And I'll share my screen. It's good seeing you all. Okay. If I see you're in the doc. If someone could take notes on who's here, I'll get started. Let's see. I have a status update. That is branch protection rule enforcement. Okay, so with the spicy PR that got rid of all of our unstandardized teams, we were not given any warning for it, and this drastically upset a lot of people, at least on our side. I'm not sure how it was on your side. All of a sudden things stopped working. So I'm trying to be making sure that this branch protection rule, which will force you to make PRs to all the repos, will at least get some warning. And so the current status is that the library that they're using for automation doesn't have all the features that they need to allow bots to bypass the PRs. So they're working on it. And they also promised that they would warn before they merge this time. So I don't expect it to be here. Definitely not by the end of the year. We'll see in the next month or two. Let's see, I'm just taking a little look at what else is on the agenda. Maybe we can do some of the faster ones first. Do any of these sound like fast things for Plowman? I know you put some on, Carson, Stefan. Well, it sounds like my next one overlaps with Plowman, so maybe we'll talk about that.
Yeah. Okay.
In the review process, go for it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I was basically wondering whether there is some sort of a reviewer process defined which one can follow, because yeah, I would like to support a colleague of ours which are in this autoscaler area, and they want a pull request to be reviewed and merged, and I use the opportunity to assign myself, thanks Sami for your support, as a reviewer, but it's not clear to me what the process of reviewing a PR is actually.
Are you talking about the process of how to review the PR, or the process of how someone gets assigned to reviewing the PR?
No, how one can review a PR.
Yeah.
Are there some common rules, guides, or whatever, or you simply review or download the source, run the tests, whatever, any pipelines which needs to be monitored, whatever?
Yeah, so it's different per where it is. I would say, obviously, like, review the code to the best of your ability, download it and try it, make sure it does what you think is correct. In a few cases, not very many, we do have automatic PR pipelines that will run. And so you can wait for those to go green. In the cases where those don't exist, I would pull the code and run like the unit tests myself for whatever it is. Personally, I don't usually run cats because it takes forever and it's hard to set up. I usually let the official pipeline run cats, and then if it goes red, we'll just pull it back out again.
Okay.
Does that answer your questions?
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, if you have an example, one, maybe we can walk through it at some point.
Okay, so at least I will start with looking into the code itself. I will pull it locally, try to build, compile, whatever, and run the unit tests and see how it goes.
Yeah.
And then if I need support, we'll reach out. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we're always here to support. Okay, I'm gonna cross off this one. Well, I thought what you were going to talk about, but turns out not, is the automatic assigning of reviewers and approvers. I will tell you, when I signed up for being tech lead, managing GitHub repos is not what I thought I would be doing, but it turns out being a lot of the job that's not super fun. I've not come up with a good way to automatically assign reviewers and approvers, or even to track all of the PRs that come in. Currently, we have projects, but projects can only track 25 repos at a time. And as you know, we have many repos. So this means that basically people are not being automatically assigned, which I don't think is great for the community, and PRs end up going under the rug until someone reminds me about them and I then assign someone. If anyone would like to help me look at how we can get these automatically assigned using GitHub or using automation or something, I would very, very much appreciate that. So I'll leave that ask here. Oh, Patrick unmuted.
No, not for a good idea, but for a remark for automatic assignment. So one issue I see is that we have like a broad range of topics in your working group. And at least from SAP side, we are rather specific to some topics. So for example, Dominic and myself, we know Go Router, HA Proxy, and these like very networking close components very well. For example, for Diego, it's rather Plamen. And so an automation would need a finer granularity from my point of view, at least for the SAP side of the house. So I know that's not all, but as we see in this call, it's at least an amount. Yeah, but I'd also like to move forward on that. So for example, for Diego release, I opened a bug already now almost 2 months ago without reaction about Envoy being an unsupported version, which I consider like critical. So I'm not sure how to get attention for those. Also, we are not very familiar with the code. So for us, it would also be something new. But yeah, that's just some sense on this.
Yeah, thank you for that context. I think there could be a way to do it. There's with something, I know there's like files you can set maybe in GitHub, and then we could do it on a per repo basis. And so it could be like, you know, you would just put your name in on the ones that you feel, well, that you could, right? So that you're not having to review every single repo, even if you don't have any context in it. But I think it would take some amount of automation to roll that out, to figure out who goes where, who belongs to what repo, and to roll it out across all of our 100-something repos. So,
but you were mainly asking for someone that tries a POC on how to do it, right?
Yeah, we'd love that. But I mean, the context is required too, so that we know what we need to do.
Yeah, I could at least check in our team if someone knows a bit about it, or we have some ideas. Yeah, maybe you can give an action item to me to at least have a look.
Assigning reviewers in ways that make sense for our working group. Thank you so much. Okay. Let's talk about AZ-aware algorithms. So there's been a Slack convo, there's this GitHub issue that I will paste in the chat. GitHub owners file. Thank you, Carson. Yes, that's what I was talking about. That Dominic opened. I think the gist of it, as I understand it, Dominic, is that we're asking for what you're asking for, like when things fail, or you want a better failover, right? So if things start failing in one AZ, it will try a different AZ because maybe the whole AZ is down.
Yeah.
And so smarter
that's it.
routing. Yeah, and I wanted to talk about this because it's related to an ask we're starting to get from customers that want something related, but not exactly the same. They want lower latency. And so they want the initial try to default to be within its own AZ.
Okay.
So not quite the same ask, but both AZ aware routing algorithms.
Ah, right. And that would fit the idea I had like 2 hours ago. I'm like so initially I had this thought that we could like use the AZ metadata in the route to smarten up the load balancing algorithm. But then you have this problem that you mentioned. How do you judge whether or not you should now switch over to a different app, even though it might not be in your AZ, in your local AZ? And like all of this weight stuff and so my next idea was even simpler, basically. Instead of trying to make the load balancing algorithm smart, we could just, whenever we get a new endpoint, we could just look at the metadata of the AZ and then put it like interleaved with other AZs so that you have a sorted list in the pool. So whenever you start your initial request, it could be, okay, I started with my local AZ. So the Go router knows its own local AZ. The first thing it gets might be a different AZ, but it doesn't have any more endpoints. So it gets the second register. Oh, that's my AZ. So I put this in front. So in the end, when you have like an app that has, I don't know, maybe 5 endpoints or whatever, you get, if Go router is in zone A, you get A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B, C, and so you have like a well-sorted list. So whenever you start running in that list, you start at the local AZ, and then if that fails, you just retry. You don't need any more magic. You just pick the next one, which will automatically be in the other AZ. So if zone A fails, you automatically check next time in zone B. You don't have to like do a hindsight thing and check what went wrong last time and wherever. So you don't need more metadata going into this retry algorithm. You just keep retrying because the list is already sorted in the right way.
That's interesting.
So right now we don't have that because the information doesn't exist, right? Go router doesn't know which endpoint lives in which AZ.
Right.
But if we just had this information, we could like play around with it at least. Try this idea, or try different ideas, because the metadata then is just open for experimentation.
Yeah, I guess the concern I have across all of the options is like, if we start messing with the routing algorithm to prefer one AZ, I know I've gotten a lot of customer issues that are like, why is this routing the way it is? One app is getting a lot of traffic and other apps aren't. It's because of sticky sessions. Someone's using sticky sessions, but like customers really care. And I'm worried about getting into the state where an app dev says, why is one of my apps getting a lot of traffic and, high CPU and the others aren't? Like I might, and so like, because the app dev has no insight into what AZ their app is deployed into, right? Or like, stuff like that.
I can easily imagine this could also be rooted in the same problem, being that you have no control over when exactly you get a register endpoint message and from whom, right? So the order could be anything. So if you're unlucky, it could be that like the first, I don't know, 5 endpoints in your list are just in one AZ, and you always try this one first because you never reach the second zone, right? So if like 1 and 2 fail but 3 works, you still end up in the same zone. So because there's no like sorting in place of those endpoints. So it could be related. I don't know. We have similar kind of similar issues with customers asking why is this one endpoint like overloaded, the second one doesn't get like almost nothing. And it's even more specific. They want to be able to actually select per app which kind of load balancing algorithm they want to have. Like for this app, I want least con. For this one, I want round robin, right? So it's even more like fine grained than that.
Yeah. I had some questions since I don't run a Cloud Foundry. Just trying to get a grasp on like how would this look from the user's point of view, right? So like, how do app devs know which app is in which AZ? Like you can look at what your IP is deployed to, but that's it, right? There's no way. Just look at IP.
Like the end user usually doesn't know, because they I don't know if they even know their own IP address, because you would have to guess like the external IP, not the silk IP, like the thing, right? So it doesn't even help you if you know your container's IP.
Yeah, you would have to know you can get your Diego cell IP from the environment variables and then just know. Right, and then like an app would have to rebalance. And so I'm imagining a situation where like someone's CF pushing and being like, oh, I hope this time when I scale up, like it gets into a different AZ that I want it to get into, hopefully. Like Diego does try to balance you across your AZs, but you can imagine if certain Diego cells are full, maybe it doesn't put you there. But are people actually CF pushing, or is this all done in pipelines? And so it would all have to be like done automatically. Do you know what's common for your users?
That's a good point. I don't have insights into how the users are pushing the apps. They usually don't use like the CLI and the script and do a CF push. It's usually wrapped around in some workflow. But I guess that workflow ends up also doing CF push. So it also, I wouldn't care too much. Since the user they don't have any means to change or give a hint to where to put this instance. They only care like for latency, right, and availability. It should be up and it should be fast. So that's their point.
But I could imagine that they'd be like, well, I guess if a lot of our clients, it turns out, are in AZ1, maybe then I care about deploying more to AZ1.
I think it should be pretty evenly balanced. Plum, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we at least aim to like put everything everywhere to avoid.
Exactly.
We have more problems with clients having only one instance. that's
exactly.
like the major thing.
Diego will try to balance the load of, the number of app instances you have as much as possible based on the current landscape configuration.
So that was going to be one of my questions. Like they do balance it if it's available, or Diego does balance it. But do you actually have enough app instances? Like if you have one app instance,
then you're out of luck.
Right.
Out of luck.
So like how many app instances would you say is normal? Maybe that's too broad. Maybe it's like everything.
I would have, like a couple of weeks back, I would have said 3. But I've seen especially for central services like we have with the UAA, it has like 10 instances or whatever, even more sometimes. And if you are unlucky with those 10 instances and like you have 5 of them in one zone, all of them in the front seat, basically, you never get to see those other instances that might be running fine. because you fail early, right? You have these 3 retries,
Right. And so that's the issue you've been running into.
yeah, right.
Interesting. How many AZs do you deploy across right now?
3.
Okay. And does Bosch automatically deploy the VMs equally across an AZ? Is that how it works?
Yes, according to sales.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for letting me dig you for information. It's so hard to understand, what like a typical deployment looks like. Yeah, I think getting the information into the routes, like pulling that AZ information from the Diego cell, putting it in the metadata in a tag in the route and sending that to Go Router, that part should be like not too hard. But it's the next part of what are we gonna do with it that concerns me. Okay.
I think once we have it, we can run a couple of experiments. We don't have to like pick one first and then just do that. I can imagine like having 2 or 3 different kinds of implementations that try different things, leveraging this metadata, and then we can like evaluate which one works the best and has the least like ramifications if things go south.
What where does this fall in your priorities right now? Are you focused on this? Are you focused on other things and this is kind of in the background?
Yeah, so highest priority right now is the retries. That's we have one engineer working on that right now. And this one would be, I guess, next, maybe next quarter. Yeah.
Okay. I would say that's similar to us. This is like on docket for what's next. So I've been trying to give it some thought. Cool. Well, let's keep talking about options and where we're at. I'm working on it so we don't duplicate any work.
All right.
Thank you so much for talking this through with me. I know we have 5 minutes to the end. I can go over. Wow, this is usually these working group meetings are real fast, and we got a very exciting one this time. Plowman, let's talk about runtime evacuation.
If you want, we can take that the variant because we are only SAP most talking here, so let's take that one at the end.
Carson, releases for tool libraries.
I'm not feeling very well right now. It's 7 a.m. and I got my COVID booster shot yesterday. So I kind of would like to push this topic if that's all right.
Yeah, no problem. Good for you for waking up and coming here anyway. Never mind, we'll talk. Go to
soon.
Stefan and Felix. Syslog drain MTLS.
Yeah, maybe can shortly discuss about it, but maybe can also then do it the discussion only with Benjamin later. So we are quite far now with this feature. I spoke about it at the beginning of this year, and now finally we have a state where I think most of the feature is implemented. We are still discussing about how to roll it out best and about the acceptance tests. And then just yesterday asked Felix, who is the main developer, that we may discuss the next steps in this working group meeting today. So when I think this was maybe I just only introduce the topic and hand over to Felix and Ben to go more into the details.
So yeah, I think if I may start, the main points for this discussion is about there are 2 things. First is the PR itself, and the other ones are the acceptance tests we wanted to work on. So this PR is almost finished, I would say, also from the comments that I got from Ben, if I understood them correctly. And I see that the last thing that is missing is to make changes that not 2 upgrades or updates are needed for implementing or introducing this feature, but only 1. And the question is, how would you think we should do this? Because if we introduce it, we will have flaps between the old endpoint that is pulling syslog bindings and the new endpoint that will introduce the client certificates for MTLS. This is I think a rather technical question. I don't know if this is to be solved here. And the other one is how should we continue with the acceptance tests, since I think both parties here found out that it's more difficult than we thought initially to adapt them for MTLS. So I don't know, should we jump into a technical discussion, Ben, or how would you like to proceed?
I'm not sure. So I guess
Is Ben still here?
yeah, I'm there. Sorry, I was thinking and then I was like trying to read the message. The meeting is going to end. Maybe we should switch Zooms. It's fair. I'm not sure which to do. Do you have any thoughts or preferences? Is the meeting over in?
Is it gonna officially kick us out? Carson, did you see something that said it was gonna kick us out, or else I think we can just stay here. Okay, we're gonna stay here, and if it kicks us out, I'll post a Zoom in our in Slack. Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
I guess my first thought is that I think that there should be ways to avoid flapping by like detecting if we've seen the new endpoint, and then like not falling back if we have at least once, right? Because I think the main behavior we're worried about is like the new endpoint never will exist until a deploy, or just like the whole log cache or the whole temporary like outages. I think if we're worried about temporary outages, if we don't, if it doesn't exist at all, like falling back seems safe, but if we've seen it, it means that it's probably going to exist indefinitely. And then we probably should assume it's an outage and not a non-existence of the new endpoint.
So you say if the new endpoint once is there on all, for example, cloud controllers, and suddenly there's an outage on the cloud controllers, we should not assume that we are just in an update case or whatever.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess that might still cause, for example, an individual syslog agent or an individual binding cache to say, oh, while I'm starting up for the first time, it might fall back once or twice if there's also a outage going on of some kind. But I would think that otherwise it should perform fairly normally.
Yeah, the idea is that during an update or during the rollout of this thing, we will have like half of the cloud controllers updated already and half of them still in the old, only equipped with the old endpoint. And of course, at some point, if the scheduler calls the API, it will query old and new cloud controllers. So this is why it will be flapping anyways during an update.
True. Never mind. Ignore everything I said.
Question is just, I mean, we can get rid of the second update step by applying the same logic to the syslog agents when they query the syslog binding cache, which means instead of introducing a flag that has to be set to false or true in the second update step, we could just make the syslog agent query the new endpoint first, and if that one is not existent, we can query the old endpoint on the syslog binding cache. Would be the same as it is between Cloud Controller and syslog binding cache. So that would reduce the update steps to 1. But still, of course, if there is an outage ongoing, it will query both endpoints, and only after that it will say, well, there is an issue ongoing.
An issue ongoing during the upgrade or in general?
No, in case of an outage, we would first query a new endpoint. It would say, well, not available. Then query the old endpoint, would also say not available. And after that, syslog binding cache or syslog agent, depending on where the outage happens, would then tell an issue with fetching bindings is happening. Most likely an outage or unavailability of one of the services.
We're a little bit worried that something will be flaky, right? So in the sense that we're worried about it, it also might be that we hit the new endpoint and then it flakes, and then it goes to the old endpoint and then it works, right?
That's an issue, of course, yeah.
So we consider retries for the old endpoint. Also, for the first one, we are asking, so we should not switch to the other endpoint at the first failure, I think.
Yeah, that's why we that's why we initially did not put 2 endpoints in there, but rather relied on introducing the new one first with a separate update step, and then query only that new endpoint. And if that one does not work, then something is wrong in general. And if we apply this flaky logic now, issues on the Cloud Controller could lead to client certificates being missed in the syslog agent. The question is, we of course should introduce retries, and also, I mean, how likely is it that I don't know, how likely is it that the old endpoint is available and the new one isn't? Of course, apart from updating and so on, in a everyday working mode for the Cloud Controller.
I wouldn't expect the old endpoint would be available and the new point would, outside of like, it's the old version of the code. Outside of probabilistically, we're having problems with like latency or some other issue, right?
Yeah, exactly. Only if a call takes too long, yeah.
Or I guess it could be a regular upgrade too, right? If we're connected to a Cloud Controller and it starts rolling. Not like a special upgrade where we're going from the old version to the new version, but just like any reason we're rolling a Cloud Controller.
But I would actually assume that the internal routing routes us to a Cloud Controller that is not in an updating state.
Maybe.
So of course, do you think the general approach is wrong, or should we just make it more robust when querying the new endpoint?
I don't know. We could think a little more about it and chat more offline. Does that make sense? We could talk a little bit about testing though, right? Is the
Like
other thing you
about
wanted to?
acceptance tests?
Yeah.
So if I understood correctly from your comment on the PR on your last one, you also tried a little bit around with acceptance tests, and at least on our side, it turned out to be more difficult than we initially thought. One thing is that, of course, the current approach uses IP addresses to directly create a connection between the syslog agent and another application on the Cloud Foundry system. Whereas we actually designed this whole syslog drain feature to route logs outside of the platform. But apart from that, you said, okay, we could also try to not use IP addresses to connect to the application, but instead use TCP routing. Problem here is that we actually do not support TCP routing, so we did not dig deeper into that. Instead, we tried implementing the acceptance tests against IP addresses, and as the applications in the CF acceptance test do not directly do client certificate authentication, we use the Envoy proxy for that. And we ended up in a lot of ifs and elses because we do not know how the acceptance test pipeline is configured. Are there Envoy proxies? Do the Envoy proxies check the client certificates? Do we use internal TLS proxy ports or external TLS proxy ports and stuff like that? So it's should I say this? It's difficult to find the correct way through the acceptance tests to finally test MTLS and also apply this to the official CATS pipeline. I mean, I have a PR, not a PR, but I have a branch where this at least runs on our systems and makes some assumptions about the setup in general. I could push that so we could have a look, but I don't know how far you went when testing that.
We mostly chatted about like what kind of things we needed, what kind of implications different ways of testing it have. We've talked about different things like what if we told people that what if CATS included a application and just said, if you can figure out how to put it somewhere where you can have TCP routing, put it there and then set a N variable that says the URL to try and connect to it with. I think we talked about like, okay, could we BOSH deploy something? I think we said probably not, right? If we could BOSH deploy something, we could deploy syslog release has a testing tool for receiving syslog, which is actually pretty nice. The problem there is that like we don't have BOSH access, right? I don't think that's an implication of running CATS. I mean, it's maybe also worth pointing out that for CATS, I guess technically speaking, we don't even necessarily have a BOSH at all. But I don't know of whether our non-BOSH based CFs actually support syslog drains at all. So who knows as far as that goes.
Yeah, well, as we were speaking of BOSH access, we tested all of this with a fluent DBOSH release, but only manually, of course. And then we went into the CATS rabbit hole. But I think, yeah, we have to do it with most likely a CF application here.
If we have TCP routing, we definitely can test it in our pipelines, right? So I think the default setup for CFD should support TCP routing.
Does TCP routing also support MTLS? I don't know anything about TCP routing. So how would you test MTLS with TCP routing?
if we have a TCP route, right, then the application itself could handle TLS, right? I would think.
Yeah, in that case, you need a CA and the certificate on the application itself, and the application would have to be configured to check that against the provided certificate from the client.
Yeah, I know there's some test packages out there that we could use to like we could push the application and say, here's your certs application, and then say, okay, here's the certs for MTLS, right? And as we were talking about this, we were like, oh wait, we forgot that we don't have access to CA on the drains themselves. We can't say, here, this is the CA that we're using. So which really limits us to real certs and like we could push an app, but then syslog agent would say, what is the certificate? I don't trust it. They signed themselves. No, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
We wouldn't end up getting traffic to the actual app.
Yeah, that's why we used the Go router MTLS backend certificate. I think this is provided in the CF manifest and has to be stored somewhere in our case. Yeah. But still, also, I don't know if this is a general setup or a SAP specific setup.
I was talking to Amelia and we were saying that like, I don't think all environment, I think you're right. I don't think all environments support TCP routing. I think for our testing environments, most of them should. But also I think that's the reason why we pulled. I think that's probably part of the reason we pulled syslog testing into a separate test suite. I say we moved it out into a separate test suite. I don't think any of us were involved in that decision, but like looking back into it, I think that's why, looking back into the PRs and discussion about it, I think that's why it happened.
So would you say that we should like not delay, how's the correct word, like to put this apart, place this apart and concentrate on the postpone. Thank you, Stefan. Postpone the CF acceptance test first and work on the PR and think about another solution for the CF acceptance test, because I don't think we can bring them in the pipeline for now.
That's fair. I don't think we have a solution everyone likes, at least, and that can run on everything. And that I think as far as cats, we'll probably end up having to find the best solution. I think the big problem with TCP routing is the CA problem. And I think the big problem with I think there's a lot of environment configuration that can change what the test is testing in terms of continuing to use Diego IPs.
Yeah. So from my side, next steps would be to rethink how we can do the update. Maybe design the polling a little bit more robust. Maybe we can store something internally to make the scheduler and syslog agents aware that an update has now happened, and if something goes wrong now, it's an actual outage and not an update case in which it should pull the legacy endpoints, something like that.
But we have to store this information when also after the next redeploy. That doesn't have, no. Not sure how it can do it, store its information persistently. Yeah, we have to think about it.
Maybe I was a little bit, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit harsh in terms of like not accepting just like saying use the new endpoint and use the old endpoint. So I'll think about that a little bit more as well. I would think that like I would spend a little bit of time thinking about this a while ago, and I was like, maybe it's fine to actually jump straight into the new endpoints entirely. Like maybe we can still tell some people to say, just go into the new version. And if you really, really, really care, here's the checkboxes to allow you to like do it a little more staged. I think that's what we did for when we moved from syslog adapters to syslog agents. One of the things we said, we had a checkbox and we told people, you know, or we had an option and we told some people that like, hey, you can go straight to the new version if you don't care that much about downtime. But if you do care about downtime, here's how to deal with it. And that was kind of icky and gross and awful. But talking about the difficulties with trying to pull or try and fall back, maybe it's the lesser of two evils here.
Yeah, I think it's just a comparison between this fallback mechanism or having to update twice or 3 times even.
3 times?
Actually 2 times. Yeah, 2 times. With the
Okay.
with the syslog agent flag, yeah, 2 times.
Okay, sounds like there's some concrete things to consider. I'm gonna cut you off for now, but you can always
Yeah.
continue on Slack. We have one last topic. If you want to talk about it now, about runtime evacuation.
It's just a interesting one. I was wondering whether such a topic have been discussed previously. Sometimes it happens on our side that we are required to shift a workloads from a given zone to another zones due to some reasons. And we do so by doing some magics. I was wondering what actually the process is of creating a community-driven topic out of a certain idea or whatever, and whether this is actually such a topic which we can consider.
So you're asking, you have like changes that you want to make to the runtime evacuation?
No, so far, I mean, as far as I know, there is no such a capabilities built into the runtime. But I was wondering whether we could somehow build in so that the runtime is capable enough or smart enough to trigger a evacuation of a given some certain workloads from affected zone and shifted to a remaining healthy zones as something built into the runtime.
So basically like a feature request, but like a large feature request, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, something like a large feature request, which most probably requires a design, requires a feedback, whatever requirements, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm. I think the first place to start with something like that would be creating an issue, probably in CF deployment. We sometimes use CF deployment as like our catch-all for like, this is going to be a big change across Cloud Foundry, and it gets the most visibility there. With, you know, your example use case and how you would with like a proposal of design and stuff like that. I think that's where we started for the PCAP suggestion as well, the new PCAP release. So I would start there and make an issue with lots of details that we can review.
In the sea of deployment.
Okay.
And
I'm not just saying it because it's not my working group. I'm like, go over there.
Yeah, but you mean just the issue itself, not with a concrete proposal. We simply trigger a discussion based on the idea.
Yeah, I would just start the discussion there. If you think your proposal needs a doc, maybe do that and link it in the issue, or write it in the GitHub issue itself. So we can have, because it's likely to affect more than just the components on this team, on this working group.
Yeah, it could be.
Depending how you want to expose it. Oh, our youngest approver. Great. Okay, Carson, I put yours for next time. But I think we made it through our agenda. A little bit over. If
Just
working
a
groups,
tiny question on the
Yeah.
CF deployment issues, because we also, for example, have HTTP3 on there also.
Ooh, yeah.
I got some eyes and a thumb up, but so I just wanted to know how are they reiterated, or what is my job to make sure that's not forgotten, or is it discussed in the TOC or?
No, if you want to discuss in the TOC, I would suggest going to the TOC meetings that they have weekly. I suggest posting it in Slack and asking for comments if you haven't already. Would probably be the best way to get eyes on it. But I guess it just depends what you need to move forward, right? If SAP is planning on doing the PRs, I would say HTTP3 would probably be a discussion with this group, and maybe also a discussion with CAPI or whatever working group Cloud Controller is in, to nail out some details. But
sorry, got it wrong.
Say that again. Oh, fine. But yeah, it's when you want other people to do the work that it starts becoming a little bit harder, right? But if you're willing to do the HTTP3 work, just let us know how we can unblock you and keep raising it.
So I mainly want to get your thoughts on it, like if you have it in back of your minds, if it will come in some backlog of yours or not. So it's also for me not very transparent what's going on your mind. So of course we can talk about if we want to invest, but I have to talk back to my management as well, and it's not that easy and just open source.
Yeah.
So what I wanted here is just your thoughts and your if you see this pushy or in the near future or long term, or how you think the efforts and just some initial comments from maybe VMware side or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's currently no discussion on VMware side about doing this.
Yeah. Okay.
So I can't imagine, I imagine it would come at some point. I don't imagine, given the lack of discussion, that it would come even in 2024 without drastic changes. Is that the next year? No, 2023, sorry.
That already helps. Thanks a lot.
Okay, but post it again and I haven't looked at the details of it. I'm happy to comment more. Great. Okay, it's good seeing you all. If these meetings continue being busy, we can always make them longer or schedule more of them, etc. So it's good seeing you all. Have a great holiday.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.